Imagine walking through a kingdom where the ruler was not just feared and revered, but worshipped as a god in human form. A man whose voice was law, whose presence was divinity, and whose blood was said to carry the power to bless or destroy. This was the Benin Kingdom of ancient West Africa, a land of bronze, blood, and belief. Here, the monarch was more than a king, he was the bridge between worlds, the living God who stood between his people and the spirits that governed life itself. For centuries, the Benin Kingdom thrived in what is now southern Nigeria, famous for its artistry, warfare, and sacred rituals. At its heart was the Oba, the divine monarch whose power was sealed through blood. The people believed the Oba's existence was ordained by the gods, that every breath he took was the rhythm of the universe itself. When he moved, the earth seemed to bow. When he spoke, priests listened. But beneath the splendor of beads and bronze lay a deeper truth, one carved in sacrifice and sanctified by blood. In Benin, kingship was never merely political. It was sacred. The Oba was the direct descendant of the gods, chosen by spiritual destiny rather than human will. His coronation marked the moment a mortal man transformed into a divine being. The transition involved elaborate rituals, animal sacrifices, secret chants, and blood offerings meant to unite him with the ancestors. Every drop of blood spilled was a prayer, a reminder that leadership demanded not just wisdom, but communion with forces unseen. To the people, the Oba wasn't crowned, he was reborn. Ancient Benin's royal altars testified to this divine belief. Sacred spaces filled with bronze heads, ivory tusks, and offerings symbolized the eternal connection between kings and ancestors. The red earth at the center of the palace absorbed sacrifices made to strengthen the Oba's spirit. The blood of goats, cows, and occasionally human captives blended into the soil, believed to feed the spirits that protected the kingdom. The ritual wasn't about cruelty, it was continuity. Blood connected the past and the present, the living and the divine, the mortal and immortal. But what did it mean to be called a living god? The Oba of Benin was not worshipped out of fear, he was venerated as the embodiment of prosperity and justice. His well-being reflected the health of his people. If drought struck, it was believed that the Oba's spiritual link had weakened. If enemies invaded, priests said the gods were testing his divinity. To restore balance, blood rituals were performed to renew his strength, sacrifices symbolically restoring the spiritual bond that tied the empire to fate itself. The most sacred of these was the Igu festival, a yearly event of purification and thanksgiving. It was believed that during this festival, the Oba purified his own spirit and the collective soul of the kingdom. Animals were sacrificed, libations poured, and ancient chants echoed through the palace courtyard. The Oba, clad in coral regalia, sprinkled the offering's blood upon ancestral altars, calling upon his forefathers to guide and bless the land. The fragrance of palm oil and burning herbs filled the air, the scent of devotion and renewal. Legends tell of Oba the Great, the 15th-century ruler whose reign transformed Benin into an empire. It was said that Uwere possessed mystical power, the ability to control fire and reign through his connection with the gods. During his coronation, the rituals were so intense that witnesses claimed the skies thundered in approval. The blood of sacrificial animals was poured into sacred vessels representing the royal ancestors, sealing Uwere's bond with divine authority. From that day, the people swore he no longer walked as a man, but as a god incarnate. Divine kingship came with heavy responsibilities. To govern justly, the Oba had to maintain spiritual balance. The kingdom's priests constantly performed sacrifices to ensure his divine energy remained strong. Blood was considered the vessel of Ace, the life force that sustained everything. Without it, even a god could falter. So when calamity struck, whether famine or rebellion, rituals intensified. Animals were offered to cool the wrath of spirits, and sometimes, human captives were used as intermediaries between worlds, delivering royal pleas to unseen deities. While this may sound brutal today, every ritual had deep meaning rooted in order and justice. The Benin people believed that life and death were two halves of the same circle, one feeding the other. Sacrifice ensured balance. It was an act of renewal, not destruction. Through blood, energy was transferred back to the cosmos, reawakening the spiritual protection over the land. And above it all stood the Oba, the living God whose divine essence made all things possible. The title, Living God, wasn't merely symbolic. The Oba's daily life was governed by sacred taboos that reinforced his divine status. He rarely appeared in public without ceremony. His footsteps were considered too holy to touch ordinary ground. Attendants cleared his path, and only priests and the most trusted chiefs could speak directly to him. His meals, prepared through rituals, carried blessings meant to preserve his vitality. To speak of him carelessly was forbidden, for words held spiritual weight, and the Oba was power embodied. Even in death, the monarch remained divine. When an Oba passed away, the transition to the spirit world was marked by solemn sacrifice. His burial rituals included offerings meant to guide him safely to join his ancestors. The next ruler would perform ceremonies ensuring continuity between the living and the dead kings. The new Oba essentially became an extension of the old, his body a living sanctuary carrying the spirits of all who came before. This eternal link was what made the throne of Benin holy. At the center of every rite stood bronze. The famed Benin bronzes weren't mere decorations, they were living records. Each mask and plate depicted not only historic events but spiritual narratives of divine kingship. The bronze heads, shaped with elaborate coral crowns, often sat atop ancestral altars, fed with the blood of sacrifices. Through these sacred relics, the Oba communicated with his forerunners, drawing from their wisdom and channeling their power. In art, the divine was preserved, eternal and unyielding. Many who served within the palace witnessed moments of chilling devotion. It was said that during the height of the Ugr Oba festival, warriors performed their dance of blood, where they symbolically offered their courage to the king. The floor would be sprinkled with sacrificial blood, over which dancers moved in rhythmic steps, a sign of loyalty and unity. The king watched, silent and radiant, believed to see not just the men before him, but the spirits moving through them. The ritual was sacred theater, divine and human realms entwined. But this divine connection also bred intrigue and fear. To offend the Oba was to risk invoking both mortal punishment and divine retribution. His words were law, his silence sacred. Even European visitors who arrived in the 15th and 16th centuries marveled at this power. Portuguese traders described the Oba as the king who speaks for the gods. They witnessed rituals that puzzled yet awed them, unable to comprehend a belief system where governance, spirituality, and sacrifice were one. The truth is, many civilizations shared this faith in divine monarchy. In Egypt, pharaohs were seen as living gods, children of Ra, who maintained Ma'at, the cosmic order, through ritual offerings. In Mexico, Aztec emperors performed bloodletting to feed the sun and sustain creation. Across continents, blood was the sacred contract between monarchs and the divine. But in Benin, this idea found a unique expression. The Oba was not merely a messenger of the gods, he was God made flesh, a being whose duty was to keep the balance of the world intact.
Through these parallels, one lesson rings clear. Humanity has always sought meaning and power. The concept of a monarch who bridges earth and heaven wasn't foreign to any culture. In Benin, Egypt, and the Aztec Empire alike, rulers were vessels of divine energy. The spilling of blood wasn't barbarism, but a symbolic act of cosmic renewal. Each ritual whispered the same truth. The price of leadership was sacrifice, and the pulse of kingship beat in the rhythm of life's eternal exchange. Still, the unique artistry of Benin gave these beliefs beauty beyond belief. The royal courts shimmered with coral beads, vibrant attire, and golden lamps illuminating altars drenched in history. The sound of drums announced every royal ritual, their rhythm meant to awaken the ancestors. The priestly chants spoken in ancient Edo tongues echoed across courtyards, prayers to sustain the divine essence of the Oba. In such moments, heaven and earth seemed indistinguishable. The people danced not before a man, but before their God-king. Yet power, no matter how divine, is never eternal. In 1897, tragedy struck. British forces invaded Benin under the guise of trade, turning diplomacy into destruction. The sacred palace burned. Thousands of bronzes were looted. Priests were scattered. To the Benin people, it wasn't just a military defeat. It was the desecration of a sacred covenant. Their living god, Oba of Benin, was captured and exiled. The gods went silent, and for a time, the rhythm of sacrifice ceased. But faith does not die with fire. Even during colonization, the spirit of the Oba endured in the hearts of the people. The rituals continued quietly in homes and shrines. The idea of divine kingship remained etched in memory. When the monarchy was restored in the 20th century, the Benin people greeted their ruler not only as a leader, but as the heir to a divine tradition stretching back 1,000 years. The Oba remained the living symbol of continuity, the voice of unseen ancestors. Today, blood sacrifices have been replaced by symbolic acts. The pouring of palm oil, the breaking of kola nuts, and traditional dances performed in reverence to the ancestors. But the essence remains unchanged. The festivals still honor the king as the living link between past and present, mortal and immortal. The palace, reconstructed on ancient grounds, still vibrates with chants of rebirth. The people still bow, not out of fear, but pride, for they know their lineage was once divine. When modern historians and artists study Benin, they see beyond ritual. They discover a civilization of profound philosophy, one that understood balance, loyalty, and symbolism long before modern governance existed. The living god was more than myth. He was a moral compass, a vessel of collective will. His rituals may have been bloody, but they represented unity, justice, and continuity. The Obas carried a burden wrapped in glory, to embody the divine while living among men. Even now, echoes of that belief move through Nigeria's cultural identity. The term living ancestor is still used to describe wise elders and spiritual leaders, an echo of the centuries when kings commanded earth and heaven alike. The Benin story, though shadowed by colonial loss, has risen again through art, museums, and cultural revival. Every bronze that returns from abroad, every festival drum that beats again, whispers an ancient truth. The divine never truly dies. It reincarnates through remembrance. The story of the living gods of Benin also reminds us of humanity's constant search for meaning in leadership. We still crave symbols of hope, figures who seem larger than life. Whether through ancient rituals or modern ceremonies, the desire to connect with something greater persists. That's why the tale of the Oba endures. It speaks to the timeless relationship between faith and power, between sacrifice and survival. It tells us that all greatness demands something sacred in return. Perhaps the true mystery of the Oba was not that he was divine, but that his people needed him to be. In a world shaped by uncertainty, believing in a king who could mediate with gods gave purpose to life and unity to the empire. Through him, the people felt protected, seen, and blessed. And so long as the Oba stood, Benin stood, a kingdom fortified not just by swords, but by spirit. His divinity was the people's hope, their altar of faith carved into history's heart. They called him the living god, not because he ruled by magic or fear, but because he embodied everything they believed sacred about life itself. In his blood ran the pulse of generations, in his voice the wisdom of ancestors, and in his spirit, the courage of a people who refused to fade. Though centuries have passed, his legacy endures, alive in every chant, in every carving, in every heart that still remembers. For in Benin, gods may sleep, but they never die. They simply awaken in new kings.